Kia Stinger GT after 5 years and almost 50,000 miles. How's it been? Going against what people would normally think about Kia, it's been perfectly reliable. The only thing I've done in those 5 years is oil changes, tires, air filters, and that's about it. I've really had zero problems with this car. So what's it been like to live with? Well, I think people buy this car expecting one thing, and what they get is something completely different. This car is marketed as being very sporty and driving like a sports car, and it doesn't, but that's not a bad thing. This is really just a straight GT car, and if you go into it knowing that, I think you'll be pretty happy with it. I think most of my complaints are fairly small. My biggest one for a car like this would be the NVH. I don't know how much of this is going to come across on this mic, but there's a lot of tire noise, there's a lot of wind noise, and for a car like this, I just don't really understand why, I guess. I understand like a big unaerodynamic SUV, but I mean, throw some more sound deadening and it would be a non-issue, because that's what this car is supposed to do. Hop in it and just like cruise long distances, but it gets kind of irritating after a few hours when you're just listening to that wind noise and hearing the tires constantly. I don't know if you can hear that when I brake. That's another complaint about Stingers, is that there's pad buildup on the rotors, and after a certain amount of time you hit the brakes and they'll just shake. It'll feel like the rotors are warped, but it's just pad material getting stuck on them. That's been happening my entire ownership of this car, and I more or less just ignore it, and it kind of comes and goes. If you're someone who's coming from a normal entry-level car like a Corolla, Camry, Accord, whatever, this is going to feel like a significant step up for you, both power-wise, interior-wise. But if you're coming from any of the German cars, or even some of the other higher-end Japanese ones, it's just not going to feel right, is the best way I can say it. It's hard to quantify, but it's not to say the interior is not nice, because it is, but it's just not exactly up to par with companies that have been doing this for years now. But as a first attempt for Kia, I mean, this really changed the game when it came out for them. No one was expecting something like this from a Korean car brand. And if you look at them now, 5 years later, they're kind of more, people are starting to accept that they can make good cars, and they are really kind of thriving in this space. But getting back to what I said about materials, this is a GT2 car, which has the Nappa leather, whatever that is. Yeah, coming from other cars, it doesn't really feel that nice. It feels kind of just like stiff and not like a supple. And that kind of ties into all the switchgear too. Like everything just kind of like feels a bit like plasticky and kind of cheap. Everyone mentions their squeaks and rattles in this car, and yeah, this one's no exception to that. The rattles when you hit bumps combined with the wind noise and tire noise, I mean, that's really where it comes up short. Also, a lot of people buying a Stinger aren't buying it strictly because of that. They're buying it because it's supposed to be fast, right? That's another area where it doesn't disappoint, but it kind of disappoints at the same time. Stingers are fairly uncommon, so a lot of people ask me what my experience has been like and how I like it. And the answer that always pops into my head is, well, it's okay, but... And that but always goes back to that this just feels like an average car. It doesn't feel special. It does feel slightly nicer than like an entry-level Camry or something like that. It's faster. And while we're talking about that, we can talk about the engine. It makes a lot of power, and it makes a lot of torque everywhere. I think peak torque on this engine is at like 1,300 RPM or something. So when you're pulling away from stoplights, it just rips. Not a lot of things can really compete with this on just off-the-line performance. But the engine is just, in general, kind of uninspiring. It doesn't sound particularly good. It's just good at what it does, and that's kind of the mantra for this entire car, is it's just good, but it's not really, like, inspiring, I guess. Going back to how people think this is more of a sports car than it is, I'm driving out here on some nice roads, and can it do it? Yes, but is it fun? Not really. It feels like I'm driving just any other car. The suspension is more on the soft side, and I am more than okay with that for what this car is supposed to be. People seem to want track suspension on every car that comes out, but I don't want that. This is in no way going to replace a dedicated sports car as something you're going to enjoy driving. But for just a chill drive around some nice roads, I mean, I'll take it. It'll do it. It's relatively comfortable. Do I wish I had a sports car out here right now? Yeah. This thing makes some power, though. On the highway, this thing is just a monster. This thing just has passing power for days. I brought my race box with me, so we'll do some testing later once we find a straighter section of road, but you're never really wanting for power in this car. And that really ties back to what this car is. It's really a GT car where you're just meant to be relaxed and you're never really working for the power. You're not working it around corners. It'll do it, but it wants to do it comfortably. And if you're looking at one of these expecting that, then I think you'll be pretty happy with it. Some of the smaller niggles with a car like this, the auto start stop, you have to disable it every time you start the car, which is annoying, but it ends up just becoming part of your routine. For someone like me, I'm 6 foot, so not crazy tall, but the angle of this rearview mirror, it has me looking like straight at the back seats, and it doesn't go up any higher. So every time I'm trying to look at something behind me, I have to like duck my head down to kind of like see what I want to look at, which really gets annoying after a while. This whole car in general, because of the styling, has a really low roof line. I don't think it's 5th gen Camaro bad, but you do kind of get claustrophobic after a while. It's really like a small kind of like cramped space for how big of a car this is. The low roof line, the small opening because of the hatch in the back. The visibility is not the greatest, but it has all the blind spot monitoring and all that, so that helps. Something to mention, because this car is meant for long distance cruising, this ends up hurting my back after about 3 hours. I think the reason for that is because you're sat so low to the floor line of this car and your feet are so out in front of you. All of the pressure is just like on your spine. You can't like support it with your feet like you could in like a taller car. And I wouldn't say the seats are uncomfortable. I think it's just that kind of seating position that ends up doing that to me. But I mean, your mileage may vary with something like that. Yeah, I'd say overall my ownership experience has been overwhelmingly positive. Am I going to keep this car forever? Probably not. I think if I wanted to replace it for something in a class like this, which is tough because these are so cheap for what they give you, but I would spend extra money and get something like a 340i, 440i, something that gets me into the B58, because I think that's just such a monster of an engine, and it would still be an upgrade compared to this. But what I would really want is something like the IS500. Even though that's not really the top of the line quality-wise, I would take that just because of the V8 and how much character that gives that car. But good luck buying one right now, and if you can find one, they're just insane prices. These are still going to be such a bargain for what you get. These make such good power though. They are so fast. Not like sporty fast, but Highway pull fast. Stoplight to stoplight fast. But yeah, this is a great road, but I just have zero desire to like push it around any of these corners. That's just not what this car wants to do. That's not what I want to do with this car. I've seen people at track days have these in GV70s, but I wouldn't do that personally. One of the things you don't really hear people talk about with these is how good the steering is, and how much it complements the suspension, and how competent the chassis is for just cruising. It is very direct, and it's a good ratio too. For changing lanes on the highway, it is just like so effortless, just kind of like whip it around for how big of a car this is. If you're just looking for a sporty daily, which is what I was looking for when I got this, I don't think you're going to be disappointed with a Stinger. I wouldn't get the 4-cylinder. There's those brakes again. I would just save the money until I could afford any variation of the V6, because it's so good and it complements this car so well for what it is. This is the all-wheel drive version of the GT, and I think that's really the best way to experience this car. It really adds to the whole Grand Tour aspect of it, and it's just so satisfying pulling away from stoplights. Even in the wet, you're never worried about traction. You can just kind of mat it and it'll just hook up and go. The rear-wheel drive version might be a bit more fun, but this isn't the car I'm driving if I'm really looking to have fun. I don't know if that wind noise or tire noise is coming across, but even right now going 60, it's louder than it should be. And it's not like these are cheap like off-brand tires or anything either. These are what this car came with, which is Pilot Sport 4S's. So it's definitely the car that's allowing that noise and not just because of the tires. It's hard to do a review about the Stinger and not talk about the gas mileage, because yeah, it's pretty bad. If you're just doing highway cruising, like on a road trip or something like that, you can get into the low 30s, which is pretty solid for how big this car is, how heavy it is, and how much power it has. But around town, it is in the teens, like high teens probably. Not great. Yeah, this thing's been really good to me. It really owes me nothing at this point. It has given me literally zero issues. Like, not one single thing. Like I say, just oil changes and air filters, like that's literally it. I've done nothing else. Is that going to continue to be the case after 50,000, 100,000 miles? I don't know. From what I've read from other people's experiences, the Stingers don't really tend to have any significant engine or transmission problems. So that's good to hear. All of the bushings still feel fine. None of that's getting worn out early. It's just those brakes that are kind of annoying. You can literally see the steering wheel shake as I hit them. But after 50,000 miles, those need to be changed anyways. But if they're the same compound and Kia hasn't updated it, it's just going to do the same thing again. What's really cool about these in the all-wheel drive format is that it is a true rear bias all-wheel drive setup. And I've never really driven the car hard enough for that to be a factor, but launching it, you can feel it. If you take like some really like slow speed corners and kind of like whip it in, you can definitely feel that the drive is coming from the rear, especially in sport mode. I think in sport mode it makes it like 80-20 towards the back. Alright, my suction mount on my draggy is not great, so I'm going to try to like hold it while I do a 0 to 60 here. I'm in sport mode. You hold to turn off traction control and stability control. I think that's it. Foot on the brake and just kind of like mat it. Alright, so I don't know if you saw my other video of where I 0 to 60 tested my 2GR MR2, but my best time in that was about 4.85, if I remember right, 0 to 60. So I would have expected this to be a bit faster, if I'm honest. All-wheel drive, launch control. And if you look at my shifting in that video, like, I'm not banging gears because I'm trying to, like, care about that transmission. Like, I'm shifting pretty easily, and it's quite a bit faster than this. Interesting. Still, for a normal street car, that's fast, I would say. Yeah, even to get to 120, it kind of took it a while. I was expecting this to be faster. That was a massive spider. Okay. It's one of those things where it feels faster just because this is such a heavy car. You can just feel how much mass is getting moved. I guess at the end of the day, it's not actually that fast. That reminds me, I didn't really talk about the transmission. When these came out, all the reviews I saw talked about how slow the transmission was, because I assume they're comparing it to dual clutches. My take on that is that I'm happy this is a conventional automatic, because driving around town, normal driving, it's buttery. It shifts smooth, you hardly even notice it. And the times you do want to go fast, I don't think the transmission's really holding you back all that much. I'm sure with the DCT, using the paddles is more satisfying. This is probably, let's try. This might be like the third time I've ever used the paddles, because there's really no point, but I mean, it's not bad. Like, that's pretty responsive. Up one. Doesn't upset the car. Shifting mid-corner. Yeah, I don't know. I get you need to find something to complain about, but this transmission for me is about perfect for what this car is. A lot of people complain it won't let you, like, bang off the rev limiter, but I'm never taking this on a track. I'm never banging this off the rev limiter regardless. That's just not a complaint for me. And the brakes are good, even though they vibrate a bit. They're still very effective. All right, let's feel some of that power again. Yeah, that transmission is plenty fast. I don't know what people are complaining about. Even those high RPM downshifts, it does not have a problem. God, those brakes, though. Really, the only reason I'm thinking about selling this car is because I've had it so long. It's not because there's anything bad about it. It's a very competent car and does a lot of things very well. Its issue is that it just doesn't stand out in any of those areas. It's not overly luxurious. It's not thrilling to drive. The engine doesn't really have that satisfying of characteristics. In keeping with the true GT nature of this car, the sound system in here is very good. It gets really loud. It's not fatiguing to listen to on those long trips. And I guess to kind of wrap this up, it's all about your expectations and what you're looking for going into a car like this. If you're buying it just as a daily, something you can drive around, it's going to be reasonably comfortable, has good amenities, be faster than the average car on the road, this is that in a nutshell. If you think you're going to take it out to the canyons and have fun driving it, you might. I don't, but that could be your personal preference. Another thing worth considering is that just because of what this car is, I don't know if it's just me, but you don't really have to care about it. I'm never worried parking this in parking lots if it gets door dings, if it's dirty. I feel like if I had an IS 500, I would care about that. But with this, I don't. And that can make it more satisfying to drive when you're not worried about little things happening here and there. If it gets a rock chip, someone door dings it, okay, it's a Kia. Whatever. It's not some super high-end, limited production, super expensive. It's just a car, and you can use it as a car, but it's nicer than the average car. It exists in a weird place, but for me, it's worked really well. That's not a passing zone, but okay. Well, now it is. Yeah, I would say it's more than fast enough too. And you're gonna run into situations like that when you're daily driving it or you're on a road trip. And it's nice being able to do it. A Camry could not do that. And with how car prices are nowadays, you can probably get one of these for about the same, if not less, than a Camry. And this is significantly more car. Will it last as long? I don't know. I can only really speak from my experience and what I've seen on the internet, but they don't really seem like they have any crazy problems that you have to worry about. It's not Toyota, but it's been doing all right for me so far. It's so hard to think what you compare this with or what you'd replace it with that exists in the same class, because nothing really does. 340i, 440i's, IS 500s, they're significantly more expensive than this. Sometimes well enough is okay. It's not the fastest, it's not the most luxurious, but it does everything reasonably well, and I think for the price you pay, I think that's good enough.